I never imagined a single phone call could unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It wasn't a text, it wasn't a vague notification, it was her voice. Late at night, through the line of a phone that I had every right to feel was mine to protect. I watched him fumble, his face pale, his fingers trembling as he rejected the call. And suddenly I felt a cold jolt of fear and disbelief. How did we get here? Was I being unreasonable, or was this the first undeniable sign that some lines had been crossed? Lines I didn't even know existed. Could a 15-year friendship between a man and a woman ever stay innocent when the dynamics change? When years of history meet new opportunities, desires, and secrecy? And if I spoke up, would I be the villain? The one who destroyed a bond that had survived decades, or the one who finally saved myself? My name is Ellie, and I'm 32. I've always believed in love that's steadfast, friendships that are open, and marriages that thrive on trust. But trust isn't always black and white. Sometimes it's gray, and sometimes it's a tightrope you're walking blindfolded, and suddenly you realize the other person might not be holding your hand anymore. They might be inching toward the edge without telling you. I married my husband, 36, for his heart, his humor, the way he made me feel like I could be fully, vulnerably me. But I also married the past that he carried with him. The high school friends, the stories, the deep roots that predated me. Among those roots was her, his best friend since high school, the girl he laughed with, argued with, and confided in long before I existed. On the surface, she was harmless. She had always been kind to me, supportive of our milestones, and strangely protective of us. Every party, every dinner, every little gathering she invited us to, he would refuse. His reasoning made sense at the time. Her best friend was his ex-girlfriend, and being together at these events would be awkward. I never pressed him. I trusted him. I even admired the loyalty and the sense of caution he displayed, thinking, maybe this is what a grown man does when boundaries are respected. But something in me couldn't shake that tiny, persistent unease. The flicker of a thought that maybe loyalty doesn't always mean harmlessness. Then came the shift. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. She became single, and her texts began appearing more frequently. Snapchats at odd hours, messages that lingered in his phone longer than usual. He promised me he'd stop, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to keep the faith in the man I love, in the life we had built together. But there's a point where trust begins to feel fragile, stretched too thin, and I found myself watching, listening, observing with a careful, uneasy curiosity. It all came to a head on a Friday night, our anniversary dinner. We'd spent the evening laughing, reminiscing, clinking glasses, promising each other small things that felt monumental in the quiet intimacy of a candlelit table. Then, at 10:30 p.m., the phone rang. I watched him, my husband, my partner, fumble with it in a panic. White as rice, jittery, avoiding my gaze. I asked who it was. His first instinct was to dodge, deflect, stall. But eventually the truth spilled. It was her. His explanation was odd, clumsy. She works at a dispensary, he said, and sometimes she could get him bud cheaper. That was the story. That was the truth he offered to justify the heart-pounding, the panic, the awkwardness that made my skin crawl. But my gut told me otherwise. Something about the way he shifted, the way he avoided my eyes, the way his voice trembled, it screamed that there was more than a business transaction going on. And I felt it. An angry, raw, twisting sense of betrayal I couldn't name fully yet. I told him, softly at first, that it didn't feel right, that it was disrespectful, not just to me, but to the sanctity of what we shared, that a single woman would feel free to call him so late, so casually, as though boundaries didn't exist. He bristled. He said I was overreacting, trying to start drama where none existed, that nothing was happening and I was imagining it. But even as he said it, I saw the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in his hands. I saw the shadow of something unspoken. I'm not a confrontational person, but I am a fiercely protective one. The choice became stark in my mind. Do I let it continue? Do I let this shadow linger over us, quietly gnawing at the trust I've placed in him? Or do I demand a boundary, a line drawn clearly in the sand? I told him he needed to cut it off, that we couldn't keep walking this tightrope with our eyes closed. The words hung between us, heavy, unresolved, like smoke in a room neither of us wanted to enter fully, but couldn't escape. I still wonder sometimes if I was wrong. Was it normal for longtime friends to call, to chat, to maintain a connection decades in the making? Am I overstepping, twisting love into control, or am I finally seeing what I ignored for too long because it was wrapped in nostalgia, friendship, and years of shared history? The questions circle endlessly, and the answers feel elusive. But one thing is clear. I can't ignore how I feel, how my instincts are screaming at me. Because this is about more than a phone call. It's about trust, respect, and the unspoken boundaries that define love. I remember that night vividly. The clink of glasses, the soft laughter, the abrupt intrusion of a phone ringing. I remember his pallor, the way he shifted in his chair. And I remember the moment I decided, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much he resisted, I would not let this friendship quietly undermine what we built. I would confront it, draw the line, demand honesty. And in that moment, I realized how thin the line between loyalty and betrayal could be, and how easily it could blur without notice. After that night, the air between us felt charged, like static before a storm. I could see it in him, the way he avoided my gaze, the slight stiffness in his movements, the nervous tapping of his fingers against the countertop when he thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't just the phone call anymore. It was the weight of unspoken things, the tiny fissures that had been forming under the surface for months, maybe even years. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but a part of me was terrified. What if I was wrong? What if I was ruining something that didn't need fixing just because my insecurities were whispering lies? We sat in our living room later that night, the glow of the lamp casting soft shadows across the walls, and I tried again. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice trembling but firm. "Why hide it?" He looked at me, really looked, and I felt the weight of his hesitation before he spoke. He said, "I wasn't hiding anything. It's just, I didn't think it was a big deal."
That's exactly the problem, I shot back. It is a big deal. A single woman calling you at night, sending messages. Why didn't you stop it before it got this far? He ran a hand through his hair and sank into the couch. Ellie, I swear, nothing's going on. She's my friend. We've known each other forever. You're overreacting. I felt a mix of anger and despair swirling inside me. I had always trusted him. I had always respected his friendships. But something about this felt different. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was obsession, need, and the unspoken intimacy of decades-long closeness that suddenly had me questioning my place in his life. How had a bond that predated us become this fragile, this threatening? Over the next few days, I watched him like a hawk. Every phone notification made my stomach tighten. Every glance at his screen made my heart race. And yet, every time I tried to confront him again, he smiled, reassured me, and I wanted so badly to believe him. I wanted to let go, to trust that the man I loved wouldn't betray me. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and doubt has a way of growing roots you can't easily pull out. Then came Saturday night. We had plans to meet friends for dinner, a casual gathering meant to distract us both from the tension hanging between us. But as we drove there, he kept checking his phone, subtly, quickly, almost guiltily. I didn't say anything at first, trying to breathe, to calm the storm of emotions inside me. But the more I watched, the more it festered. And then I saw it. Her name lighting up the screen. A message, a snap, something brief, but enough to set my blood boiling. I pulled over, unable to contain myself. "Stop, just stop," I said, my voice shaking. "Why are you even responding? Can't you see this isn't normal?" He sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. "Ellie, you don't understand. She's my friend. That's it. There's nothing else." "Nothing else?" I snapped. "You're lying to yourself. She is single. She's calling you late at night. She's messaging you constantly. Do you even hear yourself?" For a moment, the world seemed to pause. His eyes softened, and I thought maybe he'd see the fear, the hurt, the trembling line between anger and heartbreak in me. But then, just as quickly, he stiffened again, retreating behind the familiar shield of defensiveness. "You're overreacting. You're trying to start drama. Can't we just not do this right now?" And that's when it hit me. The truth wasn't in the words he spoke. It was in the gaps, the silences, the way he twisted, deflected, and avoided fully facing what was happening. I realized, with a sinking heaviness, that this wasn't just about a phone call. This was about boundaries, loyalty, and the invisible lines that define a marriage. And those lines? He wasn't just stepping over them. He was dancing dangerously close to erasing them entirely. I remember standing there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, and feeling the weight of choice pressing down on me. I could either let it slide, pretend that everything was fine, continue pretending I wasn't aware of the shifting dynamic in our relationship, or I could demand the boundary, draw the line, and risk everything in the process. And for the first time, I realized how terrifying love could be, not because it wasn't there, but because preserving it sometimes required confrontation, courage, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. The days that followed were tense. Conversations were clipped, laden with meaning beneath the surface. I watched his interactions, noted the subtle flinches whenever her name came up, the way he picked up the phone almost reflexively but never answered when I was around. And still, I questioned myself. Was I being controlling, paranoid, overly sensitive? Every part of me wanted to believe that yes, maybe I was overreacting, that friendships that predated marriage deserved leniency. But my heart, that stubborn, knowing part of me, refused to ignore the nagging, insistent truth. I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel respected, and that was not something I could brush aside. Then one evening, it all came to a head. We were at home, the room dimly lit, the silence heavy with unspoken words. I looked at him, really looked, searching for any hint of honesty, remorse, or clarity. "Ellie, please," he said, sensing the storm that was about to erupt. "I swear it's nothing. Can we just not do this?" "No," I whispered, my voice steady now, fueled by months of anxiety, doubt, and heartbreak. "No, this isn't about drama. This isn't about jealousy. This is about respect, about boundaries, about us. And if you can't see that, if you can't set this right, I don't know what else we have." For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He just stared at me, and I could see something crack in him. A recognition, a realization, maybe even fear. And I realized that sometimes confrontation doesn't destroy a relationship. Sometimes it saves it, but only if both people are willing to face the truth. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Love isn't just about moments of joy or shared laughter. It's about courage. The courage to confront uncomfortable truths, the courage to demand respect, and the courage to walk away from anything that threatens the foundation you've built. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if you would choose loyalty or if our marriage would bend under the strain of history, temptation, and long-standing bonds. But I knew this. I would not be invisible, and I would not allow my heart to be disregarded in the name of friendship. The week that followed felt like walking through a fog. Every time I saw him, every time I heard the faint ping of a message on his phone, my heart would hammer against my ribs. I tried to act normal, smile, laugh, pretend, but the anxiety had become a second skin, one I couldn't shed. He noticed, of course. He always notices when I'm distant, but instead of addressing it, he skirted around the truth, offering reassurances that sounded hollow, like echoes in an empty room. It was Tuesday night when it finally hit a boiling point. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard the familiar vibration. His phone again. I froze mid-motion, staring at him across the hall. He glanced down, a flash of panic crossing his features. I could see it in the way his fingers hesitated over the screen, a microsecond of guilt before he locked the phone and set it aside. "I can't do this anymore," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I can't pretend this is okay. I'm suffocating under all the secrecy." He sighed, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Ellie, I told you it's nothing. You're imagining things." "Imagining things?" I spat, finally stepping forward, my voice trembling with equal parts fear and fury. "She calls you, messages you late at night, keeps conversations going for no reason, and you don't see why this is a problem? I'm not imagining things. I'm living them."
He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "No, don't. Don't defend it. Just listen. I've tried to trust you. I've tried to ignore the feeling in my gut that something isn't right, but I can't anymore. Either you set boundaries, cut it off, and prove that I come first, or I don't know how we keep going." The room went quiet. Not the gentle silence of comfort, but the thick, heavy silence of confrontation. The kind where every breath feels like it's being measured, every heartbeat amplified. I saw it then, something raw flicker in his eyes. Fear. Not fear of me, not of confrontation, but fear of consequences, of losing something he hadn't realized could be threatened. I don't want to lose you," he whispered finally, his voice breaking. "But it's complicated. It's been 15 years, Ellie. You don't understand." "I do understand," I shot back. "I understand perfectly. 15 years doesn't mean anything if respect, boundaries, and love are being ignored. That's the part you haven't been seeing." The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks erupted, but so did the sorrow. Tears pricked at my eyes as I realized how fragile trust could be, how easily history could intrude upon the present, threatening the very thing you were supposed to protect with your life. "Do you even realize how much this hurts me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How alone I feel knowing that my husband, the man I chose to trust, can be pulled into someone else's orbit without even noticing the gravity it has on my heart?" He stepped closer then, a hand reaching out hesitantly. "Ellie, I'm sorry. I didn't think—" "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "You don't get to say sorry right now. Sorry doesn't erase the nights I lay awake wondering if you care more about her than me. Sorry doesn't erase the panic I felt that night when you fumbled that phone call like a guilty teenager. This isn't just about her. This is about us, our marriage, our trust, our future." And then I saw it. The realization in his eyes, the crack in his armor. He wasn't used to being confronted this way. He wasn't used to me demanding, insisting, refusing to shrink or apologize for my feelings. And in that instant, I knew I had reached a turning point. Either he would step forward, take responsibility, and draw the line, or everything we had built would fracture irreparably. I'll stop," he said finally, voice low, hesitant. "I'll end it. I don't want to hurt you. I didn't realize how much this affected you." I studied him, searching for truth beneath the words. Was this genuine or just a way to appease me? Could I trust him now, after weeks of doubt,
after nights spent second-guessing every interaction. I wanted to believe him, I wanted to hold on to the man I loved, but the journey there would be treacherous, full of lingering shadows and unspoken fears. The next day, he called her. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know it was final. The way he held himself, the somber set of his shoulders, the avoidance of eye contact when he returned. And though part of me felt relief, part of me remained wary. Trust, once fractured, is never easily restored. But there was hope, faint yet persistent, that this boundary, this act of choosing me over the comfort of old habits, could be the beginning of healing. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle changes. He stopped answering messages immediately, refused late-night calls, and even seemed more present, more engaged, as though aware that his actions were under careful scrutiny. And slowly, the suffocating weight of anxiety began to lift, replaced with a cautious optimism. But the experience had left a mark, one I knew would remain for the rest of our lives, a reminder of how fragile trust could be, how easily boundaries could be crossed, and how vital it is to confront what makes your heart uneasy, no matter how uncomfortable. I often replay that Friday night in my mind, the phone call, the panic, the confrontation. I think about how easy it would have been to look away, to pretend it wasn't happening, to allow history and loyalty to overshadow my instincts. But I didn't. And in that refusal, I found something powerful: the courage to demand respect, the clarity to recognize my own worth, and the understanding that love is not just about comfort, it's about protection, boundaries, and unflinching honesty. And still, I wonder, how many of us ignore the warning signs in our relationships, thinking time and history will protect us, when in reality, courage and confrontation are what preserve love from being quietly eroded. After the confrontation, the house felt different. The air was lighter, yet charged, as if every corner had absorbed the tension from the past weeks and was now holding a cautious truce. He was quieter, more deliberate, and I could feel the weight of his awareness in the small gestures, the way he answered my questions fully, the way he left his phone face down on the table, the way he lingered a little longer when we talked. But I still couldn't shake the shadows, the lingering what-ifs that curled like smoke through my mind. I realized healing wouldn't come from a single conversation or a phone call being ignored. Healing would come from the deliberate daily choice to honor the trust we had rebuilt. And maybe, just maybe, it would also come from letting go of the fear that had been quietly controlling me, letting it dissolve into clarity instead. He came to me then, quietly as I sat with my knees drawn to my chest, and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Ellie, I know I hurt you. I see that now. I don't want to lose what we have. I realize I took some things for granted, and I want to make it right." I looked at him, searching for sincerity, for the truth beneath the words. And in his eyes, I finally saw it: the recognition of my pain, the acknowledgement of boundaries that should never have been blurred, and the willingness to step fully into accountability. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping apologies meant for show. It was quiet, intimate, and profoundly real. "I need us to be honest with each other," I said silently now. No tremors of fear or anger. "I need us to respect the lines that protect our marriage, not just now, but always. Because if we don't, no friendship, no past, no history will ever be worth the erosion of trust between us." He nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a fragile relief. Not complete, not without the scars that these weeks had left, but enough to know that we were choosing each other consciously, deliberately. That love wasn't passive. Love required vigilance, courage, and the bravery to confront discomfort before it became a wound that might never fully heal. Over time, the tension lessened. I noticed him resisting the impulse to check his phone at odd hours. I noticed him being more present, more attuned to the little signs that make a relationship thrive. The small acknowledgments, the sincere reassurances, the thoughtful gestures that say, "I see you, I choose you." And I realized, with a quiet astonishment, that confrontation had not destroyed our marriage, it had strengthened it. It had forced both of us to face the truth, to reassess priorities, and to consciously choose respect over convenience, loyalty over nostalgia. Yet, even as things settled, I couldn't deny the lingering shadow of fear that had passed through our lives like a cold wind. It left behind lessons carved deep into my heart. That trust, once fractured, is not easily mended. That boundaries must be explicit, even when history and friendship complicate them. And that love, above all, is not about avoiding discomfort, but facing it head on with honesty, courage, and vulnerability. I sometimes catch myself reflecting on the late-night phone call, on the way my heart had raced, and I realize that fear isn't always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's a signal, a protective instinct that guides you toward confrontation rather than complacency. And sometimes it's the very thing that saves you from losing yourself in the quiet erosion of your own worth. The journey wasn't easy, and I know it never truly ends. Trust must be nurtured daily, and boundaries must be respected consistently. But I also know this: confrontation doesn't have to be destructive. It can be the catalyst for clarity, for honesty, and for the reaffirmation of love that has been tested by history, temptation, and human complexity. I look at him now, months later, and I see a man who understands the fragility of what we share, who honors the space between us, and who consciously chooses me day after day in small and meaningful ways. And I see myself, stronger, more attuned to my instincts, more willing to speak up, to demand respect, and to safeguard my own heart. I wonder how many people ignore the subtle signs. How many marriages quietly bend under the weight of old friendships, nostalgia, or unexamined patterns. I wonder how many times fear, guilt, or uncertainty keeps us from speaking, from confronting the things we know in our gut are wrong. I've learned that love isn't the absence of fear, it's the courage to act despite it. And now, I leave this story for anyone listening or reading, wondering about the lines in their own relationships, the subtle signals that whisper that something isn't right. Pay attention, trust your instincts, confront what feels wrong, even if it's uncomfortable. Draw the lines that protect your heart, and do not shrink from demanding the respect you deserve. Because at the end of the day, love that is worth keeping is love that is actively chosen, defended, and honored. So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, if the person you loved had a friendship that left you uneasy, that tested your trust and respect, what would you do? Would you speak up, confront it, and demand boundaries? Or would you stay silent, hoping that time and loyalty would protect you? Comment below, share your thoughts, and subscribe for more gripping stories where choices, courage, and human emotion collide. It wasn't instant. Healing never is. The days after our confrontation were filled with small tests, little moments where trust was quietly rebuilt or shattered again. I would catch him checking his phone just for a second, and my heart would leap into my throat. And yet each time, he would put it down without hesitation, meet my eyes, and smile softly. That simple acknowledgement, that conscious choice to prioritize us, became a ritual, a silent promise that the line had been drawn, and he wouldn't cross it again. I still remember the first night I truly felt safe again. We were on the couch, sharing a quiet evening, the city lights spilling faintly through the curtains. He reached over, taking my hand in his, and I realized that love, real love, often exists in the small, everyday choices. Choosing to listen, choosing to respect, and choosing to show up fully when the past comes knocking, that is where marriage lives. But even in that moment of fragile peace, a part of me remained vigilant, because when trust has been tested, it leaves behind scars you don't forget. You carry them quietly, as a reminder that love is not just about passion or companionship, it's about courage, accountability, and the courage to face what you fear most. And sometimes the thing you fear most isn't the world outside, but the person you thought you knew best. Weeks turned into months. The friendship faded into its proper place, redefined by boundaries that were non-negotiable. He no longer answered late-night messages. He no longer disappeared into excuses when I asked a simple question. And slowly, I began to breathe again, slowly learning to trust not blindly, but with awareness and intention. Yet the memory of that Friday night, the frantic phone call, the ghost of betrayal, the panic, the confrontation, lingered. It lingered like a shadow, a lesson carved deep into my psyche. I realized that love, like life, isn't static. It tests you, forces you to confront uncomfortable truths, and demands bravery you didn't know you had. And when you meet those tests head on, when you insist on respect and boundaries, you discover something profound, the strength not just of your relationship, but of yourself. One evening, months later, I found myself smiling quietly, thinking back on the journey. The fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into something else, a quiet vigilance, a reminder that love is a living, breathing thing that requires care, courage, and attention. I looked at him, my husband, the man who had once been caught between loyalty to the past and commitment to me, and I saw the change, not in grand gestures, not in dramatic declarations, but in the subtle, steadfast presence he offered every day. That presence, more than anything, was proof that we had navigated the storm together, survived it, and emerged stronger. Yet the story doesn't end neatly. There's no perfect closure, no fairy tale resolution. There is only life, with its complex emotions, lingering doubts, and subtle tests that remind you of what matters most. There is the ongoing choice to communicate, to set boundaries, and to remain vigilant and protecting what you hold dear. And perhaps the most important lesson of all, love that survives is love that is consciously, relentlessly defended, not from strangers, but from the familiar shadows that sometimes linger closest to home.
I share this story because it is not just mine. It is a reflection of so many of us who navigate trust, loyalty, and love in the messy, complicated human world. It is a reminder that speaking up is not betrayal, demanding respect is not control, and protecting your heart is not selfish. The real test of love is not in the easy days, but in the moments of discomfort, fear, and uncertainty, when every choice matters and silence can be as dangerous as any betrayal. So, I leave you with this. Pay attention to the small signals, honor your instincts, and never let nostalgia or history overshadow your worth. Sometimes the courage to confront is the very thing that saves the love you hold most dear. And sometimes the act of protecting yourself is also the act of preserving something sacred. Now I turn the question to you, the listener, the reader. If you were in my shoes, standing on the edge between trust and doubt, between loyalty and betrayal, what would you do? Would you confront the uncomfortable truth, demand boundaries, and risk conflict? Or would you stay silent, hoping that time alone would heal what felt broken? Comment below, share your thoughts, and remember, sometimes the most powerful act of love is choosing yourself first. Because love is not passive, love is not silent, love is not simple. Love is alive, and it demands courage.
Days turned into weeks, and yet I could not shake the ghost of that night. Even in the quiet moments, when he was beside me, laughing at something trivial or holding my hand as we watched TV, I felt the echo of that phone call, the frantic ring, his pallor, the unspoken tension. It lingered, a reminder that trust is not a switch you can flip back on, but a fragile bridge that must be carefully rebuilt, plank by plank. I started paying closer attention, not in a paranoid way, but in the way someone pays attention after narrowly escaping a storm. I noticed the way he reacted when I casually mentioned Hernshim, the subtle shift in his tone, the micro expression that betrayed his inner conflict. And I realized something terrifying. Even when someone vows to change, the past has a way of lingering, of leaving shadows in the corners of the present. One afternoon, I found myself scrolling through old photos, pictures of us together and with friends, moments frozen in time when life seemed simpler. And then I saw her. Not a picture of him and her, but of the three of us at some long ago gathering, smiling, oblivious to the tension that would later seep into our lives. The nostalgia hit me like a wave, and I felt an ache, not just for the past, but for the way innocence can vanish without warning. How do you reconcile love with history? How do you protect your present when the past is still alive, breathing, demanding space? I confronted him again, but differently this time. Not in anger, not in accusation, but in quiet, deliberate vulnerability. I need to know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, that you are choosing me every day, not just in words, but in actions. I need to see it. I need to feel it. Otherwise, I don't know if I can trust myself to keep believing. He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the tension in his shoulders, the uncertainty in his gaze. And he said, Ellie, I am choosing you. I didn't realize how much I was taking for granted. I see it now. I see you. And I swear I will not let the past hurt us again. The sincerity in his eyes made my chest tighten, but I also knew that words alone were not enough. Trust had to be rebuilt in action, in the tiny, often unnoticed moments that spoke louder than any apology. I started watching him, not in suspicion, but in hope, looking for the proof that he understood the gravity of what we had nearly lost. And he delivered it, quietly, deliberately. No more late-night texts, no more evasions, no more hidden conversations. He started including me in decisions, consulting me when plans intersected with her world. He made an effort, small but significant, to show that our bond came first. And slowly I felt the fog lift, the suffocating anxiety receding, replaced with cautious relief. But relief was not the same as closure. I realized that even when boundaries are respected and trust is slowly restored, the scars remain. They are a constant reminder of the fragility of love, the ease with which it can be undermined, and the vigilance required to protect it. I carried those scars not as bitterness, but as armor, a way to ensure that history would not repeat itself, that the delicate balance we had fought for would not be taken for granted again. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, the sky painted with the muted colors of twilight, I felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. Not triumph, not victory, but understanding, a deep, resonant knowledge that love is not passive. It requires courage, confrontation, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. And sometimes, it demands that you challenge the very people you trust most, not out of suspicion, but out of necessity to protect what is sacred. I remembered the moment he took responsibility, the way he acknowledged the discomfort and fear I had carried silently. That acknowledgement, more than any apology, became the turning point. It was the moment where love and accountability intersected, creating a bridge strong enough to carry us forward. Yet, even as the weeks passed, I remained vigilant, not out of mistrust, but out of awareness. I realized that history has a long memory, and old bonds, even innocent ones, have a way of resurfacing. I learned to watch for the subtle signs, to communicate openly, and to insist on boundaries that are respected without question. Love, I understood now, is not passive. It is conscious choice, every single day. And in those quiet moments, when he reached for my hand, smiled at me with genuine warmth, or paused to check in on my feelings, I felt a sense of peace. Not total, not complete, but enough to know that we were rebuilding something stronger than before, that even in the shadow of past tension, love can survive if nurtured, protected, and fiercely defended. Even as life slowly regained a rhythm, the nights were the hardest. Quiet moments alone felt heavier, as if the house itself remembered the tension, as if every creak of the floorboards whispered reminders of how close we had come to breaking. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the phone call again. The frantic ring, his pallor, the unspoken tension. Sometimes the anxiety gripped me so tightly that I had to sit up, take a deep breath, and remind myself that we were still here. We had survived. But survival, I realized, is not the same as peace.
Work and daily routines offered distraction, but even in those moments, my mind wandered. I replayed old conversations in my head, analyzing tone, timing, gestures, every little thing I had noticed but ignored, every tiny signal that now felt like a warning I should have heeded sooner. And yet, I could also see his efforts, the subtle changes in behavior, the way he now made eye contact, the way he no longer hid his phone, and the little reassurances he offered without me asking. It was a delicate balance, a dance of trust being rebuilt, and it demanded constant vigilance. One evening, we had a rare quiet dinner at home, just the two of us. He was unusually attentive, asking about my day, listening intently, making small jokes to lighten the mood, but I caught myself analyzing everything. Was this genuine? Was it an effort? Or was it an act of compliance to soothe my anxiety? The line between authenticity and obligation felt thin, and I realized that the aftermath of confrontation can be as complicated as the moment of truth itself. Then came a text, her name flashing briefly across his phone screen while he stepped into the kitchen. My heart slammed against my ribs, old fear rising like smoke. I forced myself to breathe, to observe before reacting. He came back, smiling faintly, phone in hand, and said, "It's just work stuff, nothing important." His calmness was deliberate, measured, and I could see the choice he was making: transparency, honesty, and prioritizing our relationship over convenience. I nodded, suppressing the rush of old panic. It was a moment of subtle triumph, one that I realized mattered as much as any grand gesture. Trust, I learned, is built in these quiet, often overlooked decisions: the decision not to answer, the decision to be present, the decision to choose love over habit. But shadows lingered. I couldn't completely silence the doubts in my mind, those what-ifs that had haunted me since that night. What if old patterns returned? What if history had more pull than we realized? And I realized that the process of healing isn't linear. It is messy, complicated, and requires constant dialogue, constant reaffirmation, constant courage to confront even the smallest sign that boundaries might be slipping. I confronted him gently one evening, speaking from a place of reflection rather than accusation. "I know you're trying, and I see the changes, but I need to know that if anything ever crosses that line again, you will put us first, that our marriage is non-negotiable." He nodded, his eyes earnest, and I could feel the weight of his understanding. "I promise," he said. "I've learned what matters most. I won't let us be threatened again. You're my life, Ellie, and nothing, not history, not friendships, not anything, comes before that." In that moment, I felt a sense of fragile relief, a tentative trust rebuilding its foundation. But I also understood that vigilance would remain. Love, I realized, is not a passive experience. It is an active, living commitment, constantly tested by history, temptation, and human imperfection. And sometimes it is the quiet insistence on boundaries and respect that preserves it against unseen erosion. The following weeks were marked by subtle milestones. He would check in, not just about logistics, but about my feelings. He invited me to decisions that intersected with her world, ensuring transparency. He consciously avoided old habits that might trigger anxiety or doubt. And each time I felt a cautious optimism, a sense that the storm had passed, but its lessons remained. I began to reflect deeply on my own journey as well. I realized that part of the struggle had been about asserting my own voice,
trusting my instincts, and refusing to let fear or doubt be silenced. Confrontation, I discovered, was not about winning or controlling. It was about clarifying, protecting, and insisting on honesty. And in that insistence, I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed, a voice that demanded to be heard, and a heart willing to fight for what mattered most. And in the quiet evenings, when we sat together in comfortable silence, I felt a sense of tentative peace. Not complete, not without scars, but enough to know that we were navigating life together, choosing each other deliberately, and protecting the bond we had rebuilt. But even in peace, I understood that life is never fully predictable. There will always be shadows, tests, and moments of doubt. And it is in how we respond, how we confront fear, how we set boundaries, how we communicate, that the true measure of love is revealed. The tension that had once been unbearable became a quiet hum in the background of our lives. But even the quiet hum can carry warning, and mine never fully went silent. I realized that trust, once fractured, doesn't fully return. It must be nurtured, guarded, and consciously rebuilt every single day. I watched him, yes, but I also watched myself. My reactions, my insecurities, the way fear could sneak in when I least expected it. I had to learn not only to trust him again, but to trust myself, my instincts, my judgment. One Friday night, I felt that old anxiety creeping back. We were out celebrating, nothing in particular, just a casual dinner, laughter with friends. But my eyes kept darting to his phone, a guilty compulsion I couldn't shake. And then I saw it. A message notification blinked briefly on the screen. My stomach dropped. My heart started pounding, the old fear rising like smoke. I forced myself to breathe, to observe before reacting. He came back, smiling faintly, phone in hand, and said, "It's just work stuff, nothing important." His calmness was deliberate, measured, and I could see the choice he was making: transparency, honesty, and prioritizing our relationship over convenience. I nodded, letting out a breath. But in that moment, I realized something else. Fear is never fully erased. The key is not erasing it, but learning to live with it without letting it control you. And that understanding, that fragile, hard-won clarity, became my new anchor. Weeks passed with small, quiet victories. He included me in every decision, every plan, and every interaction that even remotely intersected with her world. No evasions, no secretive messages, no furtive glances. And each time I felt a subtle shift within myself, a reclaiming of confidence, a rebuilding of trust that was neither blind nor naive, but cautious, deliberate, and grounded in reality. Then came the night that would cement our journey in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was late. We were at home, a soft rain tapping against the windows. I was folding laundry when I heard a faint vibration. His phone again. My chest tightened instantly. But before panic could take over, he picked up the phone, opened it, and said out loud, "It's work. Nothing else. No secrets, no messages I'm hiding." That simple declaration, coupled with transparency, brought tears to my eyes. Not of anger, not of fear, but of relief. The quiet, profound relief that comes from realizing the storm has passed, but its lessons will always remain. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. The true test of love isn't just surviving confrontation, it's surviving the aftermath, surviving doubt, fear, and human imperfection, and still choosing each other, consciously and deliberately, every single day. I remember looking at him then, really looking, and feeling a mix of emotions: love, relief, lingering caution, and a profound understanding of the fragility and resilience of human relationships. We had been through a storm, a tempest that had threatened to pull us apart, and yet here we were, scarred, aware, but stronger. And I realized, too, that this story is bigger than us. It is about the choices we make when our hearts are tested,
about the courage it takes to speak up, to demand respect, and to insist on boundaries even when it feels uncomfortable. About understanding that love is not passive, it is active, deliberate, and sometimes terrifyingly honest. The next morning, I woke with a sense of quiet triumph, not victory in the dramatic sense, but the triumph of awareness, vigilance, and hard-won clarity. I knew that the path ahead would not be free of challenges, that old habits could tempt and history could press against us, but I also knew that we had navigated the most dangerous part together and survived. And surviving together, choosing each other despite fear, doubt, and history, is its own kind of triumph. I also realized something crucial. The real power isn't in the confrontation itself. It's what comes after, the choices you make, the vigilance you maintain, the communication you demand, and the courage to protect yourself and the love you've chosen. And that, I discovered, is the essence of lasting relationships. Conscious choice, accountability, and courage under pressure. So, as I sit here, reflecting on all that has happened, I ask myself and you, the listener, how far would you go to protect what you love? How boldly would you confront fear, uncertainty, and the ghosts of the past? And most importantly, would you choose to stand up for yourself and your heart, even when the outcome is uncertain, even when the confrontation is uncomfortable, and even when love itself seems fragile? Because in the end, that choice, that courage, is what separates relationships that survive from those that quietly erode under the weight of silence, fear, and unspoken truths. And sometimes it is the quiet moments of vigilance, transparency, and deliberate action that make all the difference between losing yourself and preserving the life, love, and trust you hold most dear. It was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest, heavy yet comforting. The rain had stopped, leaving the world outside slick and shining under the streetlights. We sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating his face, and I felt a stillness I hadn't felt in months. Not just relief, but a kind of reverent pause, the calm after the storm, the fragile moment where clarity meets understanding. I looked at him, really looked, and felt a mix of emotions: love, relief, lingering caution, and a profound understanding of the fragility and resilience of human relationships. We had been through a storm, a tempest that had threatened to pull us apart. And yet, here we were, scarred, aware, but stronger. And I realized, too, that this story is bigger than us. It is about the choices we make when our hearts are tested, about the courage it takes to speak up, to demand respect, and to insist on boundaries even when it feels uncomfortable, about understanding that love is not passive, it is active, deliberate, and sometimes terrifyingly honest. He reached for my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine, and I felt the warmth of his presence, the deliberate choice that had slowly rebuilt our bond. "Ellie," he said softly, "I see everything now. I understand how close we came to losing this, and I will never take it for granted again. You're not just my wife. You're my partner, my anchor, and my heart." The words hit me in a way that nothing else could. Not a phone call, not confrontation, not fear, not anger. His acknowledgement, coupled with action, was what mattered. Love, I realized, is not just about what you say. It's about what you do when the stakes are high, when history and habit threaten, when the temptation to drift is there. It's about choosing each other, consciously, fiercely, and without hesitation. And I chose him, fully, without reservation, not because fear was gone,
but because understanding and trust had been rebuilt, stronger than before. I saw in him the man who had once been caught between loyalty to the past and commitment to the present. And I also saw the change, the deliberate, conscious choice to prioritize us above all else. That choice, I realized, was more valuable than any comfort or convenience that history could offer. As the days turned into weeks, life regained a rhythm I thought lost. The tension faded into memory, replaced by subtle affirmations, shared laughter, small gestures of care, thoughtful conversations. And yet the lessons remained. The scars, the lingering fear, the awareness of how easily trust can be fractured were now my guideposts, reminders of the courage it takes to love fully and wisely. I learned that love is not passive, it is not safe, it is not uncomplicated. It is a battlefield, a journey, a test of character and courage. And sometimes it is the quiet insistence on boundaries, the steadfast demand for respect, and the bravery to confront uncomfortable truths that defines the survival of that love. There were no grand fanfares, no dramatic declarations beyond the honesty and transparency we now carried into every moment. Love, I realized, is found in these subtle victories, in the choice to stay present, the choice to communicate openly, and the choice to honor the bond that nearly slipped away. And yet, I leave you with this. The story does not end with comfort or perfection. Life rarely offers neat conclusions. There will always be tests, shadows of history, and moments of doubt. But the story of us, of trust rebuilt, boundaries respected, and love consciously chosen, is a testament to what can survive when courage, honesty, and accountability lead the way. So I ask you, truly, if you were in my shoes, standing at the edge of fear and love, uncertainty and trust, what would you do? Would you confront the uncomfortable truths, demand the respect you deserve, and insist on boundaries, even at the risk of conflict? Or would you stay silent, hoping that history and loyalty would protect you? The answer is yours, but I promise you this. The courage to speak, the bravery to insist on respect, and the willingness to protect your heart, these are the choices that define the love worth keeping. They are the choices that turn fear into clarity, tension into connection, and near loss into survival. And as I sit here, holding his hand, feeling the steady beat of his presence beside me, I know one thing for certain. Love is alive. It is tested, it is fragile, it is demanding. But if you face it with honesty, courage, and vigilance, it can endure. And it can thrive. Because in the end, the bravest act of love is not simply to trust, it is to act, to confront, and to choose each other every day, no matter the shadows that linger.